Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here. I see a lot of names here. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So wonderful. I just want to first just say thank you to the DASA team and just for inviting me into this. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some ideas on leadership and reputation. My name is Aline Badr, and I'm an executive coach. I am based in Barcelona, but I'm Lebanese Canadian, and I've been in Barcelona for 5 years. My background is in branding and in reputation management. So you'll hear a lot about reputation as it relates to leadership, and I'm really looking forward to starting to share these ideas with you. Just so you know, what I understand is that I will not have access to any questions that you may have until we finish. So please do share those, and we'll have a chance to look at some of the questions that pop up. And I will not really see a lot of that information as it comes through. So you'll be hearing me talk straight to you, which is really not my favorite thing to do, but this is the name of the game. So that's what we'll do for a few minutes, and then I'll see you and what you have to say shortly in about 20 minutes. All right, so let's get going. Okay, so the 3 C's of influential reputation. Let's start with this great quote by Warren Buffett. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. So if you think about that, you'll do things differently. And that's precisely what we'll be talking about here, is what is it that we have to do differently, to really develop a reputation. And so a reputation is really the belief and the opinion that somebody has about you. And that amounts for about 44% of a company's marketplace. And this is great research that was done by Weber Shandwick. And it looks at, reputation of the CEO, but there's certainly a lot of different, information in that research that is quite valuable in terms of the market value of a reputation and the senior leadership that runs the organization. And so 44% is quite a large number. And if you look at the CEO reputation and the senior leader reputation, what that means is you're looking at these great numbers, like 83% of it generates positive media attention when you have a strong reputation. 70% retains the current employees if you are known to be a great leader. 87% attracts investors. And one of my favorite numbers here is the 83% for crisis protection. When you do have a strong reputation, you're really protecting yourself against crisis. And we know that in leadership, whether it's a subtle crisis or a big crisis, crises are unfortunately going to happen, in the lifespan of a leader's job. And so reputation traditionally is developed through paid media and earned media. And that has been, the story of how reputations have been, developed for a long time. However, around 2007, 2008, we really started to see the voice of the consumer really becoming, really valuable in terms of how we view a brand. And so there's a change to the news media that we started to see. And one of the things that I really want you to focus on is the last era, which is back in the day, the editor used to decide what the story is. And so that really changed in 2008 because we started to listen to what the user had to say and what the user was really writing about and talking about. And that started to shape the story. And so that is a significant change to how media is now being developed. We started to see, a rise in the visibility of leaders. We started to figure out, who is the person that runs whatever, company that we see. And we started to actually want to know who they are. That really started around 2007 and 2008. So really what we were experiencing is a change of leadership behavior. And, there was this sort of talk on transparent, communication and authenticity. And so this idea of being authentic raised a big question, specifically, with my work in PR. When you really want to be authentic as a brand, you have to ask yourself a really big question. Do you know who you are? And so that is a very, very important question to ask. And I'm not really sure that most people really do. And so how do you actually maintain your impact as a leader? How do you maintain your authenticity, and how do you generate more impact and protect your reputation in this new place, that we find ourselves in, around 2008, 2009. So a formula started to really it began to take form, in my work. And it started with awareness. So as I'll go back, as we look at this Venn diagram, there is really a formula and a relationship to how you generate impact as a leader in terms of your reputation. So it starts with awareness. And, the first principle of this is to lead yourself first, what I call the who part of the model. Do you know who you are? Can you really lead yourself? And so what that means is that there's a lot of values that we work on, a lot of purpose, thinking patterns, which is really important, and the impact that you would have on others, as you are beginning to know yourself. And so values are really, the non-negotiables of what makes you who you are. And a lot of people, don't really know what is it that makes you stand up? What are the legs of the table? If you're a table, what are the legs, that really form who you are? And so when you're trying to understand that, what you all eventually really learn is the purpose of your leadership, the meaning, the direction that you want to take, that are based in your belief systems and in your values. There's this sort of internal awareness that you go through, but there's also this external awareness, which is really, really remarkably important, because it's not just about, who you are, it's also how you're impacting others. And, if I was to ask you right now, if I had access to your faces and your voices, and I was to ask you, do you know who you are? 95% of you would tell me, yes, I know who I am. I'm quite self-aware. But unfortunately, only 10 to 15% actually are. And that is research that's done out of Harvard Business Review. That's quite remarkable. And so what that means is, you're operating really in blind spots. And there's this wonderful, wonderful book by Marshall Goldsmith, who's a world-renowned executive coach. And the title alone really is the biggest message out of this book, which is what got you here won't get you there. So you get to a place in your leadership and you realize that a lot of the skills that you have and collected over the years and got you the job won't really keep the job for you. And so there's a new world that you have to enter in terms of learning, who you are and what's required of you at this point, in your leadership. So that work for me looks like the invisible part. It's no longer these sort of titles and, the external impact that you might have or the external awareness that people know, about you. But it's really that invisible work that you get to work on and the energy that you direct yourself towards when you lead yourself first. Otherwise, you're operating in a blind spot. Now, if you're driving, the blind spot is quite a dangerous place to be. So you really want to try to get out of that. And blind spots, what they do is they show up really in work in various ways. There's overconfidence, toxic positivity. There's a sort of profitability centric, type of leadership, or the needing credit, or perhaps you're dealing with imposter syndrome that you're not aware of, or limiting beliefs. All of those things show up. And that is just, a little bit of an example of how blind spots can actually show up in leadership. So what you really want to get to is self-awareness, which is really, really important part of the model. When you have that awareness, what you're actually walking away with is clarity, the clarity of the self. But I'll tell you, clarity alone is not enough. It's not until you start to really look at changing and really fine-tuning your behavior that, clarity becomes of a huge value to you. So we look now at the behavior part of leadership and what builds really impactful and long-standing reputations is when you're looking at these skills that Marshall Goldsmith talks about, that what got you here won't get you there. What is it that you have to do in order to change your behavior? This is the principle that I call the how, the fine-tuning, your behavior, your approach, and how you're showing up, in front of others. And so these are the questions that you want to ask yourself. How is it that you listen? How do you think? How do you feel? Feelings are really quite important in relationship, in leadership and building relationships at work. How do you lead? Are you making a choice in terms of how do you want to lead? So that's the work of really fine-tuning, our behavior in leadership. One of the biggest ones is listening. Now, I know as I'm talking right now, you're probably thinking about a million different things in your head, and that's okay. I won't take offense over that. But that is sometimes what happens, and there are different levels of listening. But really what you want to get to is active listening when it comes to leadership and learning how to do that. And so there's these 3 levels of listening. The first one is what we just talked about. When somebody's talking and you're just basically in your head listening to your own voice, there's these 2 voices that are happening. You're listening to my voice, but you're also listening to yours. Level 2 is really when you're focusing so much on the individual and their words, and you're taking yourself out of the equation, and you're really focusing on what they're saying. You're asking them questions. You're getting curious about what they just said and wanting to know more. Level 3 is listening to what's not being said. And so that is that body language, that sort of energy that's around the room, that you really want to start detecting. So those are some of the fine tuning of behaviors that you want to really try to understand as you're becoming a leader. One of my favorite things about favorite anagrams is in the word listen and silent. And so if you mix that up, obviously, as you can see, it's a beautiful anagram. But what I usually tend to say is that silence alone is not enough. It's actually what you do in that silence, how active you are in that silence, that would make a huge difference when it comes to, having an impact in terms of your leadership and reputation. And, understanding your leadership styles. What kind of a leader are you? Are you a let's try this kind of leader, or are you a do as I tell you kind of leader? Without that information, without really working on being able to identify, what type of leader you want to be, it would be very difficult to understand your impact, on others. So really doing that work. And this is, 6 styles that were created by Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence, really trying to understand how emotions are really, really important part of the choice that you make in terms of how you want to lead others. What I usually talk about here is mental fitness. Now, this is exactly as this image shows you. It's actually taking your mind to the gym and really trying to understand how to choose, your thoughts. And so that is a difficult task, however, because we think 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% of them are negative, and 95% of those are repetitive. So if you're not mentally fit, you're not going to be able to detect through these 60,000 thoughts and trying to understand which ones do you keep and which ones do you take away. But that is the role of fine-tuning our behavior in leadership. You really want to try to get to some kind of a mental fitness, being able to be in choice, because otherwise we're just teeming with feelings, and every individual around the table, is dealing with their own blind spots, with their own level of emotions that they're bringing. So otherwise, it won't be as impactful as a meeting or as a leadership impact as you'd like it to be. And so one thing I really want to point out here is that thoughts are really the ones that create the feeling. The feeling creates the behavior, and then that gets reinforced. The behavior reinforces the thought, and really it's cyclical. So until you're actually mentally fit and you're able to bypass all of those thoughts and really try to choose the thoughts that you're thinking, you're really in blind spots. You're actually being led by your feelings. And so not everything you think is true. And I will repeat that. Not everything you think is true. It's very important to begin the practice of questioning what is it that you're thinking before you react to it. And so, a wonderful image that a friend of mine actually shared with me is that, it's, obviously, we're not trying to be perfect here. There are always the moments when you're going to react to certain things, but you want to get to a place, that I call self-management, and that is that idea of being able to manage yourself, manage your thinking patterns, manage your feelings and emotions, so that you are holding on to your reputation and the impact that you have on others. And so as we begin to do that, what you're actually getting is confidence, because when you're able to listen to others, that impact is different, on your team members. When you're able to really choose your thoughts, limiting beliefs and sabotaging thoughts and, imposter syndrome start to sort of go away, and your validation really is internal versus external. Now, remember, it's the tree, right? It's below the tree. That's the work. The work is on fine-tuning that and really trying to gain that confidence from inside. And then anything that comes externally, it's wonderful addition, but you're not relying on it. And so at this point, what we really start to talk about is the visibility of the leader. And this is the traditional sort of point of view when it comes to reputation. When we talk about public relations, when we talk about reputation, we often think visibility, or doing some kind of PR strategies, which are absolutely valid, but they're not as valid, if you're not really looking at the clarity of the self and really developing that confidence, from within. This principle is what I call the wow factor. This is when you are inspiring action, by actually putting yourself, out there. So I often will show this image and ask you, if people are Googling your name right now, what do you think they're seeing? And are they seeing what you want them to see? So it's a really important question to ask yourself as you are really creating that reputable leadership. And so what are people saying about you when you're not in the room, is an answer that you really want to try to find out. What is it that's being said, and how can you actually shape that, and shape the perception of what's being said about you by actually developing your visibility. So content is king. We heard that from Bill Gates in 1996, and it's still very true. Content is absolutely powerful. The idea here is to take an active role in building your reputation, to not just wait, for a reputation to be formed or a belief and opinion to be formed about you, but to really shape that by putting yourself out there and by developing visibility programs. We have a ton of ideas inside of our head, inside of our hearts, and our intuitive mind, that really can share different things that would be very inspiring and helpful, to others. And so really leaning on what from that place of clarity and from that place of confidence, you're able to share really powerful insights and messages for others to be inspired by. And so the idea here is about creating alignment, but it's about creating authentic alignment. It's no longer the sort of projection that sometimes happens in public relations, where you're projecting something that you wish you are. Instead, you're actually developing yourself and projecting that. And that is really true, authentic alignment, when it comes to leadership. So the idea here is the mask is no longer necessary. Oftentimes we go to work, we put on the suit, we put on the mask, we put on the armor, and we're not really bringing our full self into our relationships. And our impact then is diminished because we're operating, from so many things, that are blind spots and not clear. So the idea is to be able to actually take that mask off and actually have a self-expression that feels very, very true. And so what happens when you do that is you're actually gaining credibility. And credibility is absolutely essential when it comes to your reputation and the impact that you would have, on others and on the community that you are leading, and, on the entire business really that you're building. And so this is really it, clarity, credibility, confidence. And when you're aligning them all together, you're really creating a reputation for lasting impacts that no matter what happens, with all of the crises, whether they are external, internal, you're able to deal them because you really have built that alignment, through clarity, confidence, and credibility. So with that, I'll say thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the screen and see if there are any questions, and just really thank you for listening. Let's see. We go back there. And I'm not sure, Coco, if you can tell me, I don't know if there are any questions. I don't know if people can jump on and say, perhaps Coco and Jessica, can you let me know if people can jump on and say, can we invite them to speak or no? Okay, excellent. Okay. I don't think sorry, where are you seeing that? I'm not sure if I can see it. Okay. Okay. What was the question? Because I don't see it. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is really the most important thing here, is to actually work on yourself, is to work on your skills, work on, your ability as a leader. That's building your competence. And so if you're not building your competence, your reputation is not sustainable. It will be found out, particularly in this, landscape that we find ourselves in, in media. Do you have any practical tips on active listening? Absolutely. Start at home. Whoever you live with, whoever your friends are, when you're going to buy a coffee, ask a question and then don't say anything, and don't listen to the voice that you hear inside your head. Just focus on the person that's saying it. And one way to do that is focus on the face. Look at them, look at their eyes, look at their mouth, and really focus on what they're saying, and follow it up with another question that comes from what they just told you. So it's really, really important that silence is used when it comes to active listening, but also what you do in that silence is really important. So try to really not listen to the voice that you hear inside your head in level one, and really just shift it to the voice that you're hearing externally. Let's see. From Peter. Hi, Peter. This is a great session. A focus area that is so important and not talked about enough. Question: being truly authentic at work is hard. It feels super risky. Absolutely. How do we manage that balance between being truly authentic and maybe not being a good fit with the team? Absolutely. I think what I'm reading from this is, how safe are we at work to actually bring our full authentic self? So that is definitely not just your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the people that you work with and the organizational culture that we belong to. And so it is a combination of how safe do we feel. And so at some point, what you want to do is, if you've tried your best and if you are bringing your authenticity and that is not received, it is important to now have, some kind of a conversation with yourself to try to understand if this is the right fit for you. And certainly talk to, a manager or the leader that you report into to try to figure out a solution for that. But it is a combination of both. But it does start with the self. It does start with us really trying our best to bring our authenticity. And then if it's not received, then that is, a combination of decisions. Let's see, what else? Practical tips to bringing your authenticity to work when you are usually very different. One woman of color in a heavy male dominated tech work, is to start small, to start asking people about themselves, right? Don't make it about you. So practical tips about bringing your authenticity to work is to actually be curious about somebody else and start to really build those relationships from that place of curiosity. And typically what happens is that gets reciprocated. The more that you're really making them feel, seen and heard and accepted, the more that they're gonna, do that for you. And so it is, one of the ways that you can bring your authentic self is to actually allow yourself that opportunity to be curious about somebody else. And from there, you start to create that space and you start to create that impact and that safety for you to be seen, inside that organization. To work out these points when you work 100% in a remote environment. Absolutely. And that's to be active in terms of so the question was, any suggestion to work out these points when you work 100% in a remote environment, is to ask for coffee Zooms or whatever the technical, environment that you're in, to really just actually be active in terms of building those relationships. And I have to tell you that, meeting online is just as powerful as meeting in person. Maybe in person would make it that much better, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. But to actively build those relationships, to invite people to chat with you, and get to know them on a personal level is really, really important part of it. With empathy, so if you are doing this work of leading with empathy, how do you show impact? Yes, with numbers, absolutely. And look, that is a big question and a big environment to create, at work. And so again, the important thing is to do your best to be yourself, to be yourself. So if you want to lead with empathy, then do that, and then start to see how that impacts your, your relationships. Now, there's a lot of different work and research has been done on how empathy really connects to the bottom line of the individual. But it's really those relationships that you're building. The end of the day, business is created by people. Your ideas and your products and your innovation and your projects, they're all going to be met by people. So how you're treating people is going to make the difference in terms of how successful the project is, or how the sale is, or, whatever, we're trying to create in a business. So really focusing on those relationships are what's going to really create the numbers, inside of a business. Okay. I think let's see, where you say Justin Doria. Yeah. I think this is it, right? I'm not sure, Coco or Jessica, if there's anything else I'm missing. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here, for your questions, and happy to connect and continue the conversation. If you'd like to connect with me, please do so. As you can see on screen, there I am with a bunch of languages. And so I look forward to really deepening those relationships that we create together. So thank you so much for your time and have fun. It's a great conference that you're participating in. Thank you. Bye.